They decided they didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing, and so I decided, fine. But basically, I'm not going to try to. They weren't that keen to have me involved anyway. But at the same time, I said, I'm not going to. If I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble, because they're not going to do what I want them to do. So, and I don't have the control to do that anymore. And all I would do is muck everything up. It was designed to be a film, like mythology, of this is what we stand for. You're probably scared. You don't know what's going to happen. And here's a little idea of some of the things you should pay attention to. Friendships, honesty, trust, and doing the right thing, living on the light side, avoiding the dark side.
You were planning on developing Star Wars Episode 7 before you sold Lucasfilm. Can you divulge any of the details you were working on?
The ones that I sold to Disney and everything, they came up to the decision that they didn't really want to do those, so they made up their own.
George Lucas, the mastermind behind Star Wars and a pioneer of modern filmmaking, has reportedly hit his limit. Sources claim that after a private screening of the upcoming Rey movie, Lucas was visibly frustrated, expressing his dismay over what his beloved saga has become under Disney's control. This isn't just another Hollywood controversy. This is the man who built Star Wars from the ground up, watching in disbelief as the franchise drifts further from his original vision. Since selling Lucasfilm to Disney in 2012, Lucas has largely remained on the sidelines, offering occasional insights but refraining from direct involvement. However, it seems the latest developments have pushed him to a breaking point. At the center of the storm is Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, whose leadership has been a lightning rod for criticism. Since taking over, the franchise has faced a turbulent era marked by constant creative shakeups, underwhelming box office performances, and a growing disconnect with longtime fans. While some projects have found success, many argue that Star Wars has lost its heart and soul, becoming a corporate product rather than a visionary saga. The upcoming Rey movie, meant to revive the franchise, has been plagued by issues from the start. With multiple writers coming and going, shifting creative directions, and delays mounting, it's clear that Lucasfilm is struggling to find its footing. Now, with yet another rewrite underway, even George Lucas himself seems unable to stay silent. So, what exactly happened in that screening room? What did Lucas see that left him so disheartened? More importantly, can Star Wars ever reclaim its former glory with Kathleen Kennedy still in charge? One thing is certain, Lucas's reaction speaks volumes, and it may be the wake-up call Star Wars needs before it's too late.
It's now, and it happens in streaming probably more than features, but features the same thing. Nobody knows what to do. The stories they're telling are just old movies. People have a tendency to overdo it. They abuse it. Everybody went out and made spaceship movies, and they were all horrible, and they all lost tons of money. Whenever there's a new tool, everybody goes crazy, and they forget the fact that there's actually a story, and that's the point. Let's not do anything. So you got to remember, Star Wars came from nowhere. Now, if you do anything that's not a sequel, or not a TV series, or it doesn't look like one, they won't do it. They say, we want something that we know.
So that's the downside of Star Wars.
That's the downside of Star Wars, and it really shows an enormous lack of imagination.
Doubling down on past mistakes rather than learning from them. Instead of charting a bold new course for Star Wars, Disney's decision to center the future of the franchise around Rey, a character many felt was mishandled in the sequel trilogy, left fans divided. The new Jedi Order film, announced with much fanfare at Star Wars Celebration 2023 in London, was supposed to breathe fresh life into the saga. Instead, it quickly became mired in development troubles. The film has cycled through multiple writers, each bringing a different vision, only for their work to be scrapped. First, Damon Lindelof and Justin Britt Gibson were attached, only to depart under mysterious circumstances. Then Stephen Knight was brought in to take over the script. Now, yet another rewrite is underway, leaving the project in a state of uncertainty. This kind of chaotic development isn't new for Lucasfilm under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership. From the botched handling of the sequel trilogy to the cancellations of numerous announced projects, including films from Patty Jenkins, Kevin Feige, and Rian Johnson, the franchise has struggled to find a clear direction. The constant reshuffling of creative teams, combined with a lack of cohesive storytelling, has left Star Wars feeling rudderless. For George Lucas, watching his creation go through this level of turmoil must have been heartbreaking. The franchise he meticulously built, one that once set the gold standard for cinematic storytelling, has become a corporate product riddled with behind-the-scenes drama and a loss of creative identity. Lucas's reported frustration after watching the latest cut of the Rey movie isn't just about one film, it's about the larger picture. It's about seeing the galaxy he imagined lose its sense of wonder and purpose. And with Kathleen Kennedy still at the helm, many wonder whether Star Wars can ever truly recover or if it's doomed to remain stuck in this cycle of creative confusion. The question now is, will Lucas's reaction serve as a wake-up call for Disney? Or will Star Wars continue down a path that risks alienating the very fans who made it a cultural phenomenon in the first place? Britt Gibson, who were initially tapped to write the new Jedi Order film. Their involvement seemed promising. Lindelof, known for his work on Watchmen and Lost, had a reputation for crafting intricate, character-driven stories. However, just months after their hiring, both writers suddenly departed the project. While the exact reasons remain unclear, industry insiders suggest that creative clashes with Lucasfilm executives played a significant role. Following their exit, Peaky Blinders creator Stephen Knight was brought in to take over the script. His grounded storytelling style could have offered a fresh perspective, but yet again, Lucasfilm wasn't satisfied. Reports surfaced that Knight's draft wasn't well received, leading to yet another rewrite. Now, the film has a new writer. Ms. Marvel's Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy remains attached as director, but with the script still in flux, the movie's future seems uncertain. This revolving door of writers isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a larger issue at Lucasfilm under Kathleen Kennedy. Nearly every major Star Wars film project announced in recent years has faced similar behind-the-scenes turmoil. Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron was hyped with a grand teaser only to be quietly shelved. Kevin Feige's Star Wars film was scrapped before it even got off the ground. Rian Johnson's supposed trilogy remains in limbo. Time and time again, projects are announced with excitement, only to dissolve into development chaos. For George Lucas, this level of instability must be infuriating. When he ran Lucasfilm, Star Wars had a clear vision and direction. Now, under Disney, it seems trapped in a cycle of rushed decisions, course corrections, and creative conflicts. Lucas's reported outburst after watching the Rey movie screening wasn't just about one film, it was about the pattern of dysfunction that has defined the Disney era of Star Wars. With each new setback, the franchise feels further from the groundbreaking storytelling that made it legendary. So the question remains, can Star Wars escape this spiral? Or will it continue to dig itself deeper into creative disarray under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership? Creative clashes have turned the new Jedi Order movie into a revolving door of ideas, with no clear direction in sight. If a seasoned talent like Damon Lindelof, who successfully navigated complex storytelling in Watchmen, found working on Star Wars unbearable, it speaks volumes about the dysfunction within Lucasfilm. His sarcastic remark that striking was more enjoyable than writing for Star Wars was a clear jab at the leadership's stifling environment. Stephen Knight's departure only reinforced the narrative that Lucasfilm can't seem to lock down a consistent vision. His strength in crafting rich, character-driven drama could have brought much-needed depth to the Rey-led story. But by October 2024, he too was gone, another casualty of a studio that seems incapable of committing to a singular creative direction. Simon Kinberg, with his experience on Star Wars Rebels and major Hollywood blockbusters, seemed like a natural fit. Given his past collaboration with Kathleen Kennedy, many believed he might be the one to finally push the project forward. Instead, his involvement quietly faded, a telling sign that even insiders struggled to work within the constraints of Lucasfilm's current leadership. Now, in a last-ditch effort, Lucasfilm has turned to George Nolfi, best known for Ocean's 12, The Bourne Ultimatum, and The Adjustment Bureau. While Nolfi is a capable writer, his approach raises serious concerns among fans. He has expressed a desire to explore political themes in the film, much like the subtle political undertones George Lucas wove into the original trilogy. However, under Kathleen Kennedy, Star Wars has already faced backlash for prioritizing modern political messaging over compelling storytelling. With Nolfi's involvement, many fear the franchise is continuing down the same divisive path rather than focusing on the universal, timeless themes that made Star Wars iconic. What's most frustrating about this entire debacle is that each of these writers brought a unique perspective to the table, yet none could survive Lucasfilm's chaotic development process. The endless rewrites, the abrupt departures, and the lack of a unified vision have turned what should have been a major Star Wars revival into a sinking ship. For George Lucas, watching this unfold must have been unbearable. His reaction after the Rey movie screening wasn't just frustration over a single film, it was the culmination of years of watching his beloved creation struggle under mismanagement. The bigger question remains, if Lucasfilm can't stabilize its creative process, what hope does Star Wars have of reclaiming its former glory? The new Jedi Order movie isn't just struggling, it's unraveling. Constant shifts in creative direction have left the film in limbo, with no clear vision guiding it forward. For George Lucas, who built Star Wars on a foundation of cohesive storytelling and meticulous world-building, watching this level of dysfunction must have been unbearable. But it's not just the writing turmoil that likely pushed him over the edge. The choice of director has been just as controversial.
Marketing for the Rey movie that nobody asked for has been underway. The director for the movie came out and said, "It's about time we've had a woman come forward to shape the story of Star Wars." And this is so wrong on so many levels. The most obvious is that Kathleen Kennedy has been president of Lucasfilm for going on 12 years now. Secondly, there's been a female director, Deborah Chow. She directed the entirety of the Star Wars Kenobi series.
Star Wars is George Lucas. George Lucas created Star Wars. He is the godfather. He is the creator. What he says is Star Wars. And for them to completely just buy that and then throw it out and say, "No, George, you're wrong. Even though this is what you created, this universe, this world, these characters wouldn't exist without you." Well, guess what? We're throwing that away and it doesn't matter anymore. That, I think, is it. That's it. That just proves that Disney had, no respect for the fans, no respect for the stories, no respect for the creator.
I disliked the business of Hollywood intensely. When I had that choice of Star Wars being a success, I said, I'm going to try to make a go for it. And so I invested in the next movie and borrowed money from a bank and everything. I had everything at stake. I did it primarily because I didn't want the studios to tell me what to do. I didn't want them coming and commenting on my work.
That he intends to explore political themes in the film, an approach that has many fans worried. Unlike Lucas's subtle and organic storytelling, modern Star Wars under Disney has often been accused of prioritizing overt messaging over compelling narratives. If the new Jedi Order movie follows this same pattern, it's easy to see why Lucas would be frustrated. For Lucas, Star Wars was never just another sci-fi franchise. It was a mythological epic that resonated across generations. His films revolutionized visual effects, sound design, and cinematic storytelling. But more importantly, they told a universal story that audiences of all backgrounds could connect with. His vision was clear, a tale of hope, redemption, and the battle between good and evil. Now, instead of a carefully crafted, visionary approach, Star Wars seems to be lurching from one crisis to another under corporate control. The revolving door of writers, the chaotic leadership, and the apparent lack of a unified creative direction all point to a franchise that has lost its way. The Rey movie, once pitched as a fresh start, now looks more like another misstep, plagued by behind-the-scenes instability and uncertainty. Lucas reportedly sat in that screening room, not just as a filmmaker, but as the father of Star Wars, witnessing its transformation into something unrecognizable. This wasn't just about one disappointing film. It was about watching the heart and soul of his creation being stripped away. The question now is, can Star Wars ever reclaim the magic that made it great, or has it drifted too far from Lucas's original vision to ever find its way back, overshadowing the core emotional journey of the characters? Lucas understood that Star Wars was, first and foremost, a timeless myth rooted in adventure, heroism, and the battle between good and evil. While political allegories were present, such as the fall of the Republic mirroring historical democracies collapsing into dictatorship, they were woven organically into the narrative, never feeling like a lecture or an agenda-driven message. Nolfi's approach, however, suggests a shift toward a more overt, heavy-handed political focus, something that has already been a point of contention among fans. Many believe that recent Star Wars projects have lost sight of what made the franchise special, prioritizing modern political themes at the expense of compelling storytelling and character development. If New Jedi Order follows this same trend, it's no surprise that Lucas would be disheartened. For Lucas, Star Wars was never just about messages. It was about making audiences feel something. It was about hope, adventure, and the timeless struggle between light and darkness. The characters, Luke, Leia, Han, and even Vader, were the beating heart of the saga. They weren't just vehicles for political commentary. They were fully realized, relatable heroes who resonated across generations. Now, instead of crafting a rich, character-driven story, Lucasfilm seems fixated on using Star Wars as a platform for messaging. While politics have always played a role in Star Wars, they were never the defining feature until now. This shift has left many longtime fans feeling alienated, and if Lucas's reported reaction to the Rey movie is any indication, even the creator himself sees the franchise losing its way. At the end of the day, storytelling, not politics, was always the heart of Star Wars. And if Lucasfilm continues prioritizing messages over myth, the question isn't just whether Star Wars can recover, it's whether it can still be Star Wars at all. George Lucas's frustration with the New Jedi Order movie likely stems from seeing the franchise drift further from what made it great. He always understood that Star Wars resonated because it was emotionally compelling, not because it pushed an agenda. The original trilogy and prequels weren't about lecturing audiences. They were about adventure, myth, and timeless storytelling that brought people together. Watching the Rey movie double down on modern messaging at the expense of character and creativity would have been infuriating, especially knowing that his original blueprint had been abandoned in favor of a divisive approach that alienates rather than unites fans. A major sticking point is likely Lucasfilm's ongoing focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership. While Lucas has always supported diverse storytelling, after all, Star Wars was groundbreaking in representation, with strong female leads like Leia and diverse characters like Lando Calrissian and Cassian Andor. He never allowed representation to overshadow the story itself. Kennedy's Star Wars era, however, has been heavily criticized for doing exactly that. Many characters feel forced, narratives feel hollow, and the magic that made Star Wars special seems to be missing. For Lucas, seeing Star Wars reduced to a corporate mouthpiece instead of a platform for timeless storytelling would have been a bitter pill to swallow. Adding to his frustration is the repetitive nature of the sequel trilogy's villains. The First Order was essentially a recycled version of the Galactic Empire, failing to introduce anything truly new or innovative. Now, with the Rey movie once again promising to explore political themes, it risks rehashing the same tired ideas instead of breaking new ground. Lucas always prided himself on pushing boundaries, whether through storytelling, technology, or world building. Watching the franchise stagnate under Disney's control, clinging to the same recycled plots and political themes rather than innovating, would have been deeply disappointing. And then there's the chaotic production history of the Rey movie. Lucas built Star Wars with a clear, cohesive vision. Even when it evolved over time, he remained in control of the story. The Rey film, on the other hand, has been a revolving door of writers and directors, each bringing their own conflicting vision, only to be discarded when they didn't align with Lucasfilm's leadership. Damon Lindelof, Justin Britt Gibson, Stephen Knight, and Simon Kinberg, all talented writers, have come and gone, unable to find creative common ground with Lucasfilm. For Lucas, who maintained tight control over his films to ensure a singular, powerful vision, this level of disorganization and lack of direction would have been maddening. Ultimately, Lucas's reported reaction to the Rey movie screening wasn't just about one disappointing film, it was about watching Star Wars lose its soul. The franchise that once revolutionized cinema is now caught in a cycle of creative dysfunction, corporate messaging, and uninspired storytelling. The question now is, can Star Wars ever reclaim its former glory? Or has it lost its way for good?
Working with Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy and the team over there in breathing life to characters that everyone loves and has fallen in love with, and finding new characters that the next generation of moviegoers will fall in love with. I've had conversations with J.J. Abrams. I've had conversations with George Lucas, and then of course Dave Filoni, who's a big part of the Star Wars universe now. We speak very often. And Kathy Kennedy and Carrie Beck and Simon Emanuel. I mean, I think the team is really taking time to make sure that we do justice to telling the story of Daisy, and I think that she stands for something. We've seen this wonderful journey she went on in episode 7, 8, and 9, and now it's like on to the next adventure. I am a storyteller and an activist, and my body of work over the last 20 years has been guided by my activism, and every single piece of work that I've ever created has a piece of activism in it. It could be very overt or it could be covert, but it is there. And we're in 2024 now, and I think it's about time that we had a woman come forward to shape the story in a galaxy far, far away.
Are you insane? Rey Palpatine is not the heart of Star Wars. There was only 2 people you could argue are the heart of Star Wars. That's Anakin Skywalker or his son, Luke Skywalker.
Now, it is hilarious. So the director right here of the next Star Wars movie, her goal is going to be make the men feel uncomfortable. Now, there were a lot of people say, "Oh, she's talking about directing documentary. She won't do it in Star Wars." Bro, she's an activist. Of course she's going to do it in Star Wars.
I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable. To be able to look into the eyes of a man and say, I am here, and recognize that. It should make you uncomfortable because you need to change your attitude. You will perhaps look at yourself in the mirror and not like the reflection, and then say, maybe there is something wrong with the way I think, or maybe there is something wrong with the way I am addressing this issue.
Themes that transcended time and culture. Star Wars was never just another sci-fi film. It was a groundbreaking cinematic experience that redefined storytelling, special effects, and world building. Lucas understood that the key to Star Wars' success wasn't just in the lightsaber duels or space battles, but in the emotional depth, the hero's journey, and the universal struggles of good versus evil. That's why the appointment of Charmaine Obaid-Chinoy as director likely compounded his frustration. While she's a respected documentary filmmaker, she has no experience directing a large-scale, effects-driven film like Star Wars. The choice feels more like a corporate decision aimed at meeting diversity quotas rather than selecting someone with the technical expertise and visionary storytelling skills needed for such a massive undertaking. For Lucas, who built Star Wars alongside some of the most talented directors, writers, and artists in the industry, handing over such an important film to an unproven director in this genre would have felt like a disservice to the legacy of the franchise. But Lucas's frustration runs deeper than just one film. It's rooted in years of Lucasfilm's mismanagement under Kathleen Kennedy. Since she took over, the studio has become infamous for its creative instability, with projects constantly being shuffled, delayed, or outright canceled. High-profile directors like Gareth Edwards, Rogue One, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, Solo, and Colin Trevorrow, Episode 9, were all removed mid-production or walked away due to creative clashes. Even Damon Lindelof, initially tasked with writing the Rey film, left the project and later hinted that the environment at Lucasfilm was creatively suffocating. The Rey movie, announced with great fanfare in 2023, has yet to enter production despite multiple rewrites and a revolving door of writers. While George Nolfi has stepped in to take over the script, the project remains stalled, with no clear direction. Meanwhile, The only confirmed Star Wars film on the horizon is The Mandalorian and Grogu, set for release in May 2026. That marks a 7-year gap since The Rise of Skywalker in 2019, a glaring sign that the franchise, once a dominant force in Hollywood, is struggling to move forward. For Lucas, this must be an agonizing sight. He introduced Star Wars to the world in 1977 with a modest $6 million budget and a relentless drive to innovate. He took risks, pushed boundaries, and turned Star Wars into a multi-billion-dollar cultural phenomenon. But the success of Star Wars wasn't just about the spectacle. It was about heart, mythology, and universal themes that resonated across generations. Now, instead of bold storytelling and fresh ideas, Lucasfilm is tangled in endless delays, political messaging, and uninspired creative choices. The question that remains is, can Star Wars rediscover the magic that made it legendary, or has it strayed too far from Lucas's original vision to ever recover? Since 2012, under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership, Star Wars has lost much of its creative spark. While The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi generated big box office numbers, they left the fanbase deeply divided. Solo struggled financially, and The Rise of Skywalker failed to recapture the franchise's former magic. Meanwhile, merchandise sales, once a cornerstone of Star Wars dominance, have nosedived. Only original trilogy characters like Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and Darth Vader continue to sell well, while new sequel-era characters like Rey have failed to resonate in the same way. For George Lucas, who built Star Wars on strong storytelling foundations, seeing the franchise drift in this direction would be deeply frustrating. One of the most controversial aspects of Kennedy's leadership has been Lucasfilm's strong emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, in hiring decisions. While promoting diverse voices is important, many fans feel that this focus has come at the expense of compelling storytelling. Instead of prioritizing experienced filmmakers with a deep understanding of the franchise and blockbuster filmmaking, Lucasfilm has handed major projects to directors with little to no experience in large-scale, effects-driven storytelling. A prime example is Charmaine Abaid-Chinoy, an award-winning documentary filmmaker who has been chosen to direct the Rey film. While her accomplishments in human rights documentaries are impressive, she has never directed a major blockbuster, let alone one as high-stakes as Star Wars. This decision has raised concerns that Lucasfilm is prioritizing corporate messaging over hiring talent with the necessary experience to craft an engaging, large-scale Star Wars film. This shift likely added to Lucas's frustration. He has always integrated diversity into Star Wars in an organic way, without making it the central focus. Characters like Leia Organa and Lando Calrissian weren't just there to check diversity boxes. They were compelling, fully realized figures who fit seamlessly into the universe. The concern many fans and insiders share is that Lucasfilm under Kennedy has moved away from Lucas's storytelling-first philosophy in favor of using Star Wars as a platform for corporate-driven social messaging. For Lucas, this represents a fundamental departure from the vision that made Star Wars a timeless and universally beloved franchise. The question now is whether Lucasfilm can course-correct and restore Star Wars to its former glory, or if the franchise is doomed to continue down this path of creative decline.
That is the new name. That is what they're going to call her no matter what. The name that she gave herself, the name that she chose to have, right? They're not going to dead name her as Rey Palpatine.
She was born with the name Palpatine, but now she identifies with the name Skywalker.
Now, with that being said, let's state the obvious. This is not a personal attack on Shireen Abed-Chinoy, the director, right? She's done some amazing work highlighting some atrocities taking place around the world, and that's fine. But when I go see a movie, right? When I go see a Star Wars movie, it's all about escapism, not about highlighting issues that you deemed important by your own personal bias.
Disney's $4 billion acquisition of Lucasfilm in 2012 was supposed to be a surefire investment, but the numbers tell a different story. Beyond the films, Disney has poured billions into theme parks, streaming content for Disney Plus, and merchandising, all with underwhelming returns. Shows like the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi have struggled to maintain consistent viewership, and Star Wars content on Disney Plus lags behind other streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon Prime in terms of engagement. Merchandising, once the crown jewel of the Star Wars empire, has seen a sharp decline. While classic characters from Lucas's original trilogy, particularly in LEGO sets, continue to perform well, newer characters like Rey have failed to capture the same enthusiasm. For George Lucas, Star Wars was never just about the films. It was about creating a multi-generational brand with lasting cultural impact. This decline in both cultural relevance and financial success reflects a fundamental failure in how Disney has managed his creation. The Rey movie isn't just another troubled project. It's a symbol of everything that has gone wrong with Star Wars under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership. Lucas's reported frustration after the screening highlights the deep disconnect between his original vision and the current state of the franchise. Years of creative missteps, financial blunders, and an overemphasis on political messaging have left Star Wars struggling to find its identity. The big question now is whether Disney will finally make the necessary changes to save Star Wars. Should Kathleen Kennedy step down to allow new leadership to guide the franchise back to its roots? Can Star Wars recapture the magic that made it a cultural phenomenon in the first place? What do you think? Is there still hope for Star Wars, or has it drifted too far from George Lucas's original vision to be saved? Let us know in the comments.